just been convicted for a manslaughter through gross negligence. So there's clearly a disparity between terrorists and the security forces that served in Northern Ireland. Totally unacceptable, and something that we've been saying all along throughout the legacy process. It's a disgrace and should never have happened. And that's all I've got to say on the matter. Thank you very much.
Well, let's cross live to Belfast Crown Court. Sky's David Blevins is there for us. And David Holden is the first veteran to be found guilty of a historical offence in Northern Ireland, sentenced today. How significant a moment is this?
Well, you've just heard from Paul Young, who speaks for former British soldiers who served on the streets of Northern Ireland during the Troubles. Understandably, they think a 3-year sentence for manslaughter is harsh, despite the fact that it's been suspended for 3 years, meaning David Holden is not going to be sent to prison. I expect Aidan McAnespie, the victim, his family will completely disagree with that. We expect to hear from them also within the next half an hour, and that's because 53-year-old David Holden was found guilty of the gross negligent manslaughter of 23-year-old Aidan McAnespie, who was shot dead back in 1988. While he was a person of interest to the security forces, in other words, a suspect, he was unarmed when he was shot in the back after walking through a military checkpoint at Auchnacloy in County Tyrone on his way home from a Gaelic football match. David Holden, a former Grenadier Guardsman, was 18 years old at the time, and he did admit firing the fatal shot, although he said he had done so accidentally because his hands were wet from cleaning the walls of the Sanger at the time. In giving his judgment a few weeks ago, Mr. Justice O'Hara described that as a deliberately false account. So he's taken some time to think about what sentence to impose after finding him guilty. He did list some of the mitigating factors brought by the defence. They said he was just 18 years old at the time, that he'd been convicted of manslaughter, not murder, and that while he was grossly negligent, there were others who were equally culpable who were not before the court, and that the army itself might be negligent. The sentencing hearing also heard some harrowing victim impact statements, one of them from the family recalling how their late mother used to walk every evening from her home to the spot at that military checkpoint where her son was shot dead, reciting the rosary. And they talked about the fact that this is not a legacy case for them, it is an everyday occurrence for them, still trying to come to terms with what happened to their brother 35 years ago. But ultimately, Mr. Justice O'Hara, despite the fact that he'd weighed up a number of similar cases, came to the conclusion that because David Holden had no previous conviction and had, as he said, made a positive contribution to society in his career since, he was imposing a 3-year sentence but suspending it for 3 years, and therefore he has escaped a custodial sentence. Because of controversial legacy legislation currently making its way through Parliament, which would effectively bring to an end this type of prosecution relating to historical offences in Northern Ireland, he may well turn out to be both the first and the last to be convicted of a historical offence during the Troubles since the Good Friday Agreement in 1998.